Hello everybody, welcome back to another exciting edition of Edpuzzle Lecture Notes. Basically we're only going to go over like two things today, pretty much two main topics. The first one's called biodiversity. Biodiversity. Hopefully you know by now that the three letters bio mean life, and I hope that you know that diversity or diverse means that there's a variety. Therefore, biodiversity is the variety of life that can be found within an ecosystem. Is there a lot of different plants and animals living in an area, different types? That would be high biodiversity. Is there a very low amount of different species of plants and animals living in an area? That would be low biodiversity. Alright, so why are we even talking about biodiversity? Why is it important? Definitely know this. Biodiversity helps to ensure that species can survive over time, especially when something dramatic happens, some sort of dramatic change. For example, 65 million years ago, there were dinosaurs walking the earth. But I think you guys know a giant asteroid came flying to the earth and exploded, and all the dinosaurs went extinct. Well, most of the dinosaurs went extinct. Some, they say, evolved into birds. But there were other animals on Earth other than just dinosaurs 65 million years ago. There were tiny little mammals, kind of like little mice. Our relatives, they were around. They were small and they survived. They did not die. So it was good that there was not just dinosaurs on the Earth 65 million years ago. It was good that there was biodiversity. Because if there wasn't, all life on Earth would have ended. But some things were able to survive that asteroid impact. All right, now there's two different types. Species diversity, basically that's what I've just been talking about. It and biodiversity are kind of the same thing. Species diversity is how many different types of species are living there. Are there a lot of different types of plants? Are there a lot of different types of animals, insects, etc.? That's species diversity. Now the other one's called genetic diversity. And genetic diversity is how diverse are the traits or characteristics within a population. So are all the tigers in India exactly the same, or are they a little different? That would be genetic diversity. If you look around, not all people are exactly the same. We have different hair color, eye color, skin color, height, weight, etc. We have genetic diversity because our DNA is different. Okay, now just some pictures that'll show you kind of what species or biodiversity kind of looks like. This is a tropical rainforest, probably in South America. Tropical rainforests are ridiculously high in biodiversity. They just have millions and millions and millions of different species of plants, insects, and animals living there. So you can kind of look over here. I mean, you got the leopard, you got the panther, you got these two macaw parrots, red frog, it's probably a green frog somewhere. There's different types of butterflies, different types of flowers, whatever those guys are there in the tree. These guys, I mean, there's just tons and tons of things living there. They still find new species of insects in the rainforest pretty much every week. They find a new species of insect every week because that is just ridiculously high amount of biodiversity. A lot of different types of life. Now, if you look down here, this would be a desert like you'd find in California. And yeah, there's different things. You got the cactus here. And you got these small little plants. And if you could zoom in, you'd probably see maybe a rattlesnake or a jackrabbit, maybe a coyote. It has relatively moderate biodiversity, but not as high as the tropical rainforest. There's not as many different types of living things here, different types of living plants, animals, insects, etc., as there are up here. And now we'll go to Antarctica over here. Look at this. Look at this biodiversity. I see penguins, and I see penguins. That's it. I mean, there's hardly any plants, and you don't see any plants here. It's just snow. I'm sure there's some seals and whales out there and fish out there in the ocean, but there's very low biodiversity. Here are some plants that grow in Antarctica, but you don't see a lot like just the millions of different or thousands of different types of plants that you would see in a rainforest. You do not see that in Antarctica because Antarctica has very low biodiversity. There's not that many different types of plants and animals living there. All right, so the last slide was species diversity. How many different species live in an area? That's species diversity. This one's going to be genetic. Genetic diversity. So this is variety or diversity within a population, within the same species. So here, this is a fruit common in tropical areas called the kiwi. You can see not all these kiwi look the same. This one's very big and green. This one's more yellow. This one's got a little red in it. These guys look way different. These guys are orange. All the same species of kiwi, but they have a variety. They're not all exactly the same. And that's due to their DNA. Everything living, remember that was one of the characteristics of living things, their genetic information is stored in DNA. And everybody's DNA is a little different. You can see these guys down here, these tigers. They're all the same species. They're all tigers. But this guy looks what we normally look like as a tiger with his kind of orange fur. This guy's kind of pale. This guy's almost all white. And this guy's kind of a mixture. Same thing with giraffes. Their coloring, the lengths of their neck, the spots on them are all vary just a little bit because there's genetic diversity. And of course ladybugs, if you ever see them on the lawn, usually they're red, sometimes they're green, sometimes they're kind of yellow. Same species of ladybugs, but there's variety. There's genetic diversity within the population, and that is good. All right, this slide, I just want you to pick one of these things. This is a plant. These are all what's called invasive species. I know I haven't gone over it yet, but I'm going to. But I want you and your partner to pick one of these, and I want you to write. I want you to say, why is this an invasive species? You can pick the zebra mussel, the kudzu vine, Asian carp, whatever you want. And also, how does it harm the environment? How do they harm the ecosystem? And more importantly, what do invasive species do to biodiversity? Now, this is not like my master's classes where you got to write like 4,000 word essay. You don't have to do that. Very short. Why are these guys invasive? And what do they do to the ecosystem? And more importantly, what do they do to biodiversity? Very quick, little short write. All right, so the last slide had invasive species. Those are also called non-native. Here we're going to look at here's the definition of native species. Native. That's an animal or plant that have developed, occurs naturally, or have existed for many years in an area. So, here in California, sequoia trees. They're only about 30 miles away from us. These gigantic sequoia trees are native. They're native to California. I've never seen one of these guys in person, but the mountain lion, native to California. They are naturally found here. Same with Mr. Coyote here. I've seen these quite often. They're native to California. Now, can you tell me which of these guys out here, which of these guys are native and which of these guys are non-native? All right, hopefully you said Mr. Jackrabbit here, native to California. Mr. Kangaroo, sorry, nope. Kangaroos are not native to California. Squirrels? Yep, squirrels are. Native to California, you will naturally find them here. Alligators. They're native to the United States, but no, they are not native for California. These guys would be considered non-native. It's like the opposite of native. They're not native, they're non-native because they are not naturally found here. All right, I guess in case you didn't understand the last slide, this one's pretty much the same thing. Native species. These are plants and animals which are naturally found in an area. So it could be Tulare, it could be California, whatever. Those are native. They're supposed to be there. They're naturally found there. Well, the opposite of that, of course, is non-native. Non-native species are in an area that they're not naturally found. And these are almost always introduced to that environment by humans. In Florida, there's a bunch of pythons that now live in Florida. They're not native to Florida, but humans would have a pet python. When it got too big for its cage, they would just turn it loose. Well, now there's a whole population of pythons that live in Florida. Some other terms for non-native species: introduced. The reason introduced is because they're introduced to the ecosystem by humans. Definitely no invasive. That was the last term. Invasive is another word for non-native. And these other ones, alien, exotic, I'm not going to use those, so don't worry about remembering those. But definitely no invasive, definitely no non-native. And the last slide, and this will be a super important one, because if you get a written question on a test coming up, I guarantee you it's going to be this question right here. What is the typical result of bringing a non-native species into a new habitat? And this is the stuff you should be including in your quick write. But if the environment is similar to the organism's original habitat, so like the pythons in Florida, very similar to their original habitat in South America. Well, if that is the case, the introduced non-native species will reproduce rapidly. Rapidly. Their numbers will go way, way up. And why is that going to happen? Because these organisms have few or no predators to keep their population in check. There's nothing out there that's going to eat the ball python in Florida because the other animals, they've never seen it before. So those animals avoid it, therefore the python's population just explodes. So as a result of, I don't remember if you remember, but the competitive exclusion principle, which states that no two organisms can have the same niche. Well, if they have a niche that's similar to a native species of organisms, they're going to what they call choke out the native species. So basically, the population of the non-native species is going to go way up, and the population of the native species is going to decline dramatically. And even more importantly, that you'll need to remember, the last thing, biodiversity in the area is reduced because the non-native species basically takes over the area and all of the native species populations go down. All right, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.